Bible is that dreams are received while a person is sleeping, not awake. We find that in Job 33. Visions are received while a person is completely awake and aware about their thoughts. But with either one, if it doesn't square up with what the Bible says, you can be certain that it is not from God. It is either random or it is from the enemy. So there is a difference in dreams and visions. Dreams while you're sleeping, visions while you're awake. So then the other question that came up was, does God speak to us through dreams and our visions? And the correct answer is perhaps. But we read in Job 33:14, using the Holman Christian Bible, where God speaks time and again, but a person may not notice it. So there is a possibility that God does speak through dreams and visions, and we just may not be aware of it. That's what I found from that. Anybody have a comment or a question about dreams and visions from last week? 33, 14, and 15, actually. Does that cover your question, Wayne?
Yeah, I wonder how you would interpret, how that would play into Peter's vision when he saw the animals come down.
Yeah.
Did that really go with what God had taught? Or God's word, I guess.
Yeah. That did, yeah.
It did?
Yeah, I think so.
Because he says it does.
But
Jesus
Peter even
says,
says, Lord, I have never done
I don't know exactly word for word what that text is saying, but okay. Anybody else have a comment or question about it?
So if I have one of those aha moments and I think of something, it could be from anywhere.
Good thing you have to check but verify. I think what Ronald Reagan said. So,
You know, at the time when Peter saw that vision, there was a lot of clarification going on from Jesus' ministry.
yeah.
And Jesus tried to teach them things, and they were still, are you sure that's, am I understanding this right? And I think they had a lot of good reason for it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, the Samaritan, the whole thing with the Samaritan woman, that whole story is anti-traditional.
Yeah,
For them.
absolutely. Yeah.
It went so far against everything they knew, but they were, I think that God and Jesus were showing their grace and helping them understand, helping through what was certainly, and we know we have record of hotly debated topics.
Oh, throughout.
So, and we're so happy that no longer do we have hotly debated topics anymore. To pull the line out of Terry's sermon.
Gary we got hung up. Anyway. All right, we'll continue our study in Ecclesiastes. We start back in chapter 5 and finish chapter 5 and go into chapter 6. Who did their homework? 2, 3? Oh well, the rest of you are going to be lost. Because we got a lot to cover, and I asked you to read it ahead of time, because we're not going to actually read the scriptures as it is. We'll touch them. We're going to dive into them, and we'll talk about them, but we're not going to actually read the whole text. We don't have time, unless y'all want to stay here longer. No matter to me. So, as we go through here, if you're visiting with us, I think most everybody's been here at least once. Just jump in with a question or a comment if you have one. So, here we go. In our sinful nature, we live in a kingdom ruled by wealth, power, possessions, and self. In the kingdom of heaven, we're able to see those things within their proper perspective and to participate in the larger plan of God in the world, all the while trusting Him to do what only He can do. Solomon makes a series of insightful statements in Ecclesiastes 5:10 through 15. Randy Alcorn paraphrases each verse, and I'll give you the paraphrase from Randy Alcorn. Verse 10, the more you have, the more you want. The more you have, the less you're satisfied. In verse 11, the more you have, the more people, including the government, will come after it. Also, the more you have, the more you realize it doesn't you no good. Verse 12, the more you have to worry about. Verse 13, the more you have, the more you can hurt yourself by holding on to it. Verse 14, the more you have to lose. And then 15, the more you have, the more you'll leave behind. Money has an unusual ability to control us. According to Douglas Wilson, a man may work hard to acquire money only to discover at the end of the day that the money has actually acquired him. John D. Rockefeller was once asked, how much money is enough? And he famously answered, just a little bit more. Chuck Swindoll says, money can buy us tons of comfort, but not an ounce of contentment. So when it comes to wealth and possessions, we will always want more under the sun, but fulfillment can only be found beyond the sun. One of the fascinating realities of the Bible is that there is never a place where possessing wealth, even great wealth, is forbidden. While Jesus declared that the poor would be blessed, he was referring to the poor in spirit in Matthew 5:3, not income. The issue clearly isn't wealth, it's our attitude toward wealth. And what does 1 Timothy 6:10 say? I'm sorry, that was a question. For money is a root of all kinds of evil.
No.
Love of money.
No.
The love of money.
For the love of money
Until
is
the
a root
CD
of
will
all.
allow that fast.
I'm like Gary, I have to make sure you're awake here one time. In chapter 6, Solomon reminds us of the vanity of work. That's not to say that we shouldn't work. We should do our best in our work and not make our work our life's purpose, because this also is vanity. Any questions or comments? All right, we're going to go straight into the questions. So what does Ecclesiastes 5, 8, and 9 say about the treatment of the poor and corruption in government?
It'll always be there.
Okay, what does it say first? What's the first part of verse 8?
You shouldn't be surprised.
Don't be surprised. That's what I'm looking for. Don't be surprised. A poor person being oppressed by the powerful, every official is under orders from higher up. In other words, don't be surprised if the oppressed are oppressed more, but don't worry about your official because he has someone over him telling him what to do. So it's kind of a chain reaction. Always a bigger fish. Yeah. What is the danger of losing money? I'm sorry, loving money. What is the danger of loving money and why?
You can only serve one master.
Okay. What else?
Never enough.
Never have enough. You're never satisfied. And our favorite word for Ecclesiastes is vanity or futility, right? Meaningless, depends on your translation. So what happens as prosperity increases in verse 11? Do what? You'll want more? More?
The rich don't sleep.
Okay, we're going to get to the rich in just a second. Bob's got it. Bob's right on track. You'll want more. In other words, the more you make, the more you spend, right? Generally.
The more there are to take it from you.
And Uncle Sam likes to get his share.
That's not what Dave Ramsey says. The more you have, the more you give away.
That's what you should do with
You don't
it.
have any debt.
Yeah, that's what you should do with it. Yeah.
So then that makes somebody else
Make somebody else what?
have more.
Oh.
Well,
Well,
you're selective and you give it away.
it's depending on who, yeah. If you give it to someone who
Give it to the rich.
needs it, then that's fine.
But even Dave Ramsey has friends that wouldn't be his friends. He wasn't in the position he is now. He says that
Only
sometimes.
do is it all. Only do is it all.
Yeah, so it's funny about that. Yeah. So what does not allow a rich person to sleep well? Deborah's touched on it. Wealth or abundance, verse 12. Look at verse 12. Is there a contradiction here? This is New American Standard. The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. In other words, I guess the working man can sleep well on a full stomach, but a rich man cannot. Is that what it's saying?
Rich man had learned, he ate too much and didn't feel good.
He overdid it, is that what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
saying?
How many times have you walked away from the table and said, oh, like too much?
Wow. Most days I do that at least once.
To me, I think it's more about the contentment of the two
Yeah.
stations in life.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of whether they're full or not, it's that the laborer is content that he's had something to eat and now he can sleep. Whereas the rich man is even though he's had something to eat, he can never be content because he's always worried about protecting what he has and getting more tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the laborer says, "Oh, I'm grateful. I got something to eat. Now I can go to sleep."
Yeah.
It's a contentment mindset.
Right.
Is really the difference. It's not the amount of food.
And there is some contentment, or there should be some contentment. And I know this is hard to see sometimes, but when we do work and we accomplish a goal, and we come back and we can sit down in our recliner and just say, I did it, it's finished, or whatever. Where the rich man, he's the one, he's directing orders. He's just sitting around telling other people what to do. So, any comments, questions about that?
Brother, the flip side of money, Romans 12 says it's a gift.
Yeah.
And it's a gift if you use it properly, and it says to be liberal with it. So money is not necessarily a curse.
Correct. It's like I said, it's our attitude toward it.
Yeah, I think about worry comes into play, and I think, when you have a lot, you kind of depend on it.
Yeah.
And then if you depend on it, you worry about it.
Yeah.
Is he going to lose it? Or what's going to happen? And so I think about, of course, Jesus' words that don't worry. And if you don't have anything, you might worry about your next meal, but when you get it, you're pretty happy. So I think for me, it drives me back to what am I depending on? And if it's money, I'm going to have a hard time sleeping at night and worrying a lot about these things.
Well, aren't we told that God will provide for those who love Him?
You worship one or the other.
Exactly, yeah. Wayne, you have your hand up, or you just?
I was just thinking.
Okay. Anybody else?
Lynn?
Yes, sir, I'm
I
sorry.
think that I'm probably the richest man in this room, but
All
I
right.
let Janice do all the worrying.
Those of us that know them, the answer to that is amen.
Exactly.
That's right.
And they leave Tuesday. You leave Tuesday on your cruise, right? John? Trip?
Yes. Tuesday.
On your flight?
Yeah.
Have you still got a pilot? Have you found out yet?
As far as we know.
As far as you know, you have a
Hey,
pilot.
Sunday, of course they do. They wait till
Yeah.
Monday night.
You don't find out till you get there.
I have a good friend that's a stewardess for Delta, but I don't think she goes international, so she won't have to. So, number 5, how does Solomon view hoarding wealth in verse 13? What does he call it?
Grievous
Harmful?
evil.
Grievous evil?
And it's, it is harmful. It harms the younger.
Yeah, it does. We see this, he uses this term grievous evil in both verse 13 and then later in verse 16, which we'll cover when we get to number 9. So what does hoarding tell you about a person? We got TV shows about people hoarding. What does that tell you about those people?
Basically, it points toward insecurity.
Exactly. And I put down, they have no faith in God to provide. So, I know we don't have anybody in here that are hoarders.
The only reason I'm not is because I'm married to Jennifer.
Are you?
Then remember, it's not hoarding if it's books.
What, Wayne?
I'm just gonna say, a lot of times you just keep things in case somebody needs them.
Exactly,
Like
exactly, yeah.
somebody poor or somebody
Yeah.
in need. You just don't wanna, I guess you will give it to the goodwill, but maybe,
Yeah, that's my philosophy. You know, if I already have a dozen of them, I don't need to go out, I won't have to go out and buy one later.
Yeah, but if you're a hoarder, you don't even know how many you
You
have.
don't, you don't.
You don't know. You go buy, you can't find it, so you go buy another one.
Yeah. And most of the TV shows, they're not true hoarders, they're just junk, they just don't throw anything away. I mean, food, trash, and everything.
But hoarding's also the opposite of what we're talking about, is generosity.
Yeah,
And that's a sign of true selfishness.
yeah. So Christy, how many times do you read a book more than twice?
More than twice?
Yeah.
Besides the Bible, probably none.
Those are the ones you need to give away. Generally, most people do not read a book more than twice.
What if you don't even read it once?
Start reading, yeah. I was just gonna say that if it's shoes, it's not hoarding.
Oh, you're right.
Yes, you can wear them more than twice.
For you or Kevin?
No.
I've been living on only 5 pairs in the last 3 months because I had to pack them all.
Okay.
Proud of myself.
So number 7, what happens when the rich man loses his wealth through bad luck? What does verse 14 say about that?
Left nothing for his kids.
Yeah, he doesn't leave anything. Are we told to leave an inheritance for our children? Is that scriptural?
No, not really, no.
That's not
But that hasn't stopped me from hearing some sermons
Yeah.
that basically are saying we should leave an inheritance for our children, that it's God's law.
Yeah.
That's a stretch.
Yeah.
Hopefully our inheritance to our children is their love of Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
As they
Yeah.
saw through us.
Yeah. That's the most important inheritance.
If you hoard a lot, they'll inherit a lot.
Yeah.
Jennifer around our place, we don't inherit anything.
Yeah, but if you ever go to an estate sale and see all the personal items they're selling that the family doesn't want. So how is a man born and how will he leave this life? Verse 15. Came into the world naked, he'll go out naked. So how does verses 15 and 16 inform us about our personal attitude toward wealth?
It's not yours.
And the little bit we do have, what do we do about it? What can we do about it?
Give it away or not take it with you.
You can't take it with you. What 15 and 16 says.
There are ways that you can store up treasure.
Yeah, well, they're not material things, right?
I think they do. I mean, to me, if you're giving of your treasures to something, that's the way it's stored up.
Like a mutual fund?
Well, no, I mean, this is the church, giving it to poor.
You will not be able to take anything material with you. I mean, the pharaohs, they're buried with all this gold and stuff, and they find the thing and it's still there, all the gold's still there, Ron.
I think what Randy's talking about is when Jesus said, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
It says, give to the poor.
Yeah.
And that's what Randy's talking about.
Yeah.
I said this too, is that's one way you can take it, and Jesus preaches that.
Yeah, we can earn stuff to take to heaven, but it's not material. Number 10, according to Ecclesiastes 5:18, what attitude should one have toward his or her labor? You okay, Bob?
No.
What you need?
Find satisfaction.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sorry. Verse 18, what attitude should one have toward his or her labor?
You find satisfaction.
Satisfaction. One couple translations say reward. I think that's New American Standard says reward.
I think you ought to not whine about your
Yeah.
job.
Okay.
I mean,
So often we hear people, oh,
I hate my job.
Yeah.
And it's just like everything else. Well, you have a choice. You can find the good in anything.
Yeah. Or
Praise
find
God
it.
for breath in the morning and
Yeah.
Pay so you can eat at night.
I wrote down physical work equals physical reward, spiritual work equals spiritual reward. So what did Solomon consider a gift from God in verse 19? Verse 19.
Hard work.
Wealth is one.
The ability to enjoy it, I thought.
Ability to enjoy it, accept your lot in life. How about good health? Didn't he talk about good health?
Ability to enjoy it.
And enjoy your work? That's New Living uses those phrases. So why does a person not worry about how short life is? Yeah. God keeps such people so busy enjoying life that they take no time to brood over the past.
You know, as far as people living, a lot of folks live a long time in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Solomon really didn't. He wasn't one of the, he wasn't in the 600 years old club, you know.
Do we know how old he was when he died?
You can read different things, some as early as in his 50s, and latest I've seen is close to 100.
Oh, really?
95. But,
Yeah.
Josephus, I think, said something
Okay.
about how old he was, but he wasn't extremely old from what we know.
Yeah. Well, 700 lives, where you at?
You reckon?
Ecclesiastes 6, 1 and 2, what were the three things God gave this man? What?
Wealth,
possessions, and honor. Wealth, what? Honor? And something else.
No lack of.
No lack of anything or everything they could want, or he could want. So what does the preacher or Solomon say God did not give this man? Oh.
That's back to that choice.
Yeah, he doesn't give him the chance to enjoy these things. So God blesses this man with wealth, honor, and everything he wanted.
Wait a minute, what you said, the chance? No, God does not grant the ability.
Doesn't give them the chance to enjoy these things. Yeah,
Okay.
this is New Living.
Yeah, that just seems odd because he does give them a chance to choose to enjoy them. Am I misunderstanding?
Could be. We could be different here. New Living says, verse 2, God gives some people great wealth and honor and everything they could ever want, but then he doesn't give them the chance to enjoy these things.
He doesn't give them a chance.
Yeah.
They have to take that on themselves.
Yeah. They die, and then the verse continues, they die, and someone else, even a stranger, ends up enjoying their wealth. Okay? Anybody else have a question or a comment?
It's kind of like having a boat.
Break out another 1,000.
The owner has to take care of it, maintain it, park it,
But it's,
fuel it,
it's friends.
clean it.
They get to
But his
enjoy it.
friends. Is that true, Gary?
And his wife. Yes, that's true.
Well, that's like when I was growing up, we didn't have a pickup truck, but our friends had a pickup truck, and we would borrow their pickup truck. You know, awesome. So who is better off than a man who finds no satisfaction in life and doesn't even get a decent burial? And I apologize, this may be tough, but we'll just read the scripture.
Stillborn child.
Yeah, maybe they're born dead. So how is a stillborn child better than one who suffers such an affliction?
They're automatically in the hands of God.
Exactly, and what other thing? I mean, that's the main thing, David. I agree with you there.
They never see suffering.
Exactly. They do not see the sun nor the turmoil of this life. So what is the outcome for the man who lives to be 2,000 years old but does not learn to enjoy good things? verse 6.
Same place.
He's still gonna die.
Yeah, he's still gonna die like everyone else. So it's sort of like, what's the use?
Lynn, one question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, that thing on the proper burial, what are the things, what does the Bible say about proper burial? Does it?
What are you referencing?
What's the last question?
Still
Verse
born.
3, where it talks about receiving
Yeah.
proper burial.
In NIV, it says.
Oh, okay.
This man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial. I say that a stillborn child is better off.
Well,
Yeah, but
King Jehoiakim died unlamented and dishonored. So that's part of what, if your people that knew you, people that benefit from that wealth, dishonor you and don't lament your passing of death, you really have been, even if you're under the ground, you still have been poorly buried because you were so much of a pain in the neck that nobody wanted to be around you anyway. So,
I think the proper burial is more of what people say about you when you die.
yeah.
Like what do you call that?
Eulogy.
Eulogy.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it's more talking about there, receiving a proper burial, because I don't think the Bible tells you that you have to have a tombstone or anything like that, or there's some kind of proper way to bury someone.
Yeah.
I mean, I was
What
asking because
translation,
there's
what
some.
translation are you reading from?
That's NIV.
NIV? I got
I'm
American Standard.
asking because when we were in Salt Lake City and we went and did the little tour thing or what, I mean, of course, the Mormons,
Yeah.
but, they're like, oh, no, you have to be facing in this direction, has to be, and then the term Christian burial, which, you come across, and it seems like that now cremation is much more, at least to me, more common.
Yeah.
And I just wondered about that, if that was referencing that, or if there's anything else.
The reason I asked you what translation, because New American Standard, the word proper is in italics. Usually, sometimes when words are in italics, it means they're not from the original. So, there were,
Levitical laws for burial.
there was, yeah.
But this, I don't think it's referencing that as much.
Yeah.
It's probably just more, joyous prosperity, and then people have good things to say about it. I read yesterday some guy died, and he was very mean. Family did not like him, and they had him cremated and put his ashes in the cat's litter box. That's what they thought of him, and they felt good about it.
Wow.
Wouldn't come in by that.
Jeremiah tells us, he said, they will not mourn him,
Yeah.
and that he will have the burial of a donkey, dragged away and thrown outside the gates of Jerusalem.
Gary, haven't you mentioned before in your chaplaincy situations, sometimes you'd be the only person at a funeral? Were you the one who said that?
Yeah, the honor guard and myself and the funeral director, there
Yeah.
was one time that we were the only, no family came.
Yeah.
We were it. It was
That's
sad.
Yeah.
And I think specific to this verse, it specifically mentions that he has 100 children, right?
Yeah.
So in this specific example, this man has 100 children, yet none of them are willing to give him a proper burial. So to me, the phrase proper burial here speaks back to the nature of the man, because even though he has a great family and it's large and all of these things, when he dies, none of them think enough of him to give him a burial.
Yeah.
So in this particular verse, I think that's the way the proper burial is supposed to be viewed. It's in the context of this man has all these relatives, but none of them care enough about him to give him a burial.
Yeah.
So I think those two have to go together in this.
Yeah, good point.
Plus, if you live to be 2,000 years old, all your relatives are dead. Everybody you know.
In verse 7, Solomon repeats the thought from verse 10 that we will not be satisfied when we try to fulfill all of our desires. So what does Solomon say about desire versus contentment in verses 8 and 9? What does Solomon say about desire versus contentment?
Why are we studying this right before lunch?
While we doing what?
Studying this right before lunch.
Oh. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. Anybody have a comment about contentment versus desire?
Psalmist says that the poor man is happy with what he sees in front of him, and he doesn't think about all the things that he's missing, and whoa, me,
Right.
because I don't get all the things that I'm missing.
Yeah. If you don't have it or never had it, then you won't miss it.
Yeah.
But what does verse 9 say? Look at verse 9. And this is New Living Translation here. Enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have, which is what Deborah's talking about. Just dreaming about nice things is meaningless, like chasing the wind.
So who does chase the wind other than sailors?
Wayne, he's a sailor. So number 19, why do you think there's so much emphasis on the danger of money? Why do we talk about the evil, quote unquote, of money so much?
That's what people fuss and argue
Yeah,
over more
yeah.
than anything else.
And that's how we measure success, don't we? Our money, our things, whatever.
Also, if you consider Solomon, he did not ask for great wealth when he had the choice to ask God, what do you want?
Yeah,
And yet, he got great wealth, and I think he experienced through that also what a temptation it is.
Yeah.
He didn't even seek for it,
no.
yet he had it.
He asked for wisdom.
Yeah.
So as God
Yeah.
blessed him, he had the wisdom to know what to do with that wealth.
And that, I mean, so certainly he's one that can talk a lot about the struggles of great wealth.
Yeah.
And probably the greatest that ever lived.
Yeah. Kevin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think money competes for for our devotion,
Yeah.
for our dependence. And God, I believe God wants us to depend on Him. And money is a very alluring thing that we get caught up in depending on.
Yeah.
And even our currency has an oxymoron on it. In God we
In
trust.
God we trust, yeah.
But do we really trust Him?
Yeah. Jim, do you have your hand up?
I'm not gonna say anything.
Huh?
I'll keep it.
Okay, Shane?
Well, I was just gonna draw it back to the sermon topic today about the difference between freedom and slavery. And I think a lot of in this particular section of Ecclesiastes that we're looking at, what we see here is Solomon warning us that, because a lot of times we think money is a source of freedom.
Yeah.
Right? We think that, but what I see here in Ecclesiastes in this section is really Solomon saying, no, money is a trap. Money is a slave driver. Wealth is going to take you to your grave, worrying about more and more and more money. And so when I look at this particular section of Ecclesiastes, it really is money is not freedom. Money is a slave driver.
Yeah.
And we can become addicted to that slave driver, and it's not going to make us happy.
Yeah.
And back to the sermon, only the freedom that we find in the contentment of what God provides in His love and through Jesus, that is what we seek.
Right.
Not the slave driver money becomes and ruins our lives.
Right. Jim?
It reminds me of Jesus telling a parable about the rich young ruler about what you need to do. He was willing to do everything except give up all his money.
So what did he do?
He went away, sadly.
Ran away sadly.
This might be political, but I think the whole pandemic was because of greed for money. I think that whole thing was caused by that. Not everybody agrees with that, but I think that
I'm sure there was some greed in it. I'm not gonna say 100% of it, but a lot of it. Rich.
Most of the evils that we find in this world, though, even in back here and now, are caused by some form of greed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Then the rich young ruler went away sorrowful.
Doesn't say he didn't do
It
it.
didn't say that he didn't go and do that.
Yeah.
Because a person can be sad that that's what they know they need to do, but they do it anyway.
Yeah. Number 20, with what perspective does God want us to view our possessions? We've kind of touched on that.
That they're meaningless.
Yeah, meaningless. Can't take them with you.
Well, they belong to him.
That, exactly. We're just stewards.
So that's yours.
We're just stewards. So why is money and material possessions or acquisitions unable to bring happiness or contentment? What's the big word? Vanity?
Man-made.
Man-made, they're meaningless. So Solomon says not to be surprised when you see the oppression of the poor or the perversion of justice and righteousness. Remember that everyone answers to someone higher. He also observes the proper use of riches. Riches do not satisfy and can be the source of much anxiety. It is fitting to enjoy the good in one's labor, but the ability to enjoy it is a gift from God. Solomon concludes by telling us that man's labor might feed his mouth, but it does not really satisfy the soul. By asking who knows what is good in this short life and who can tell what will happen in this life after we are gone, the preacher implies that only God and not the accumulation of wealth provides the answer to the vanity of life under the sun. Any questions, comments about what we talked about today? John?
I think money is just another synonym for addiction.
Could be.
And even though I haven't ever smoked or been a drug addict or whatever, I do have addictions in my life.
Yeah.
And it's the same as money.
Yeah.
Whatever is our weakness, that's where the devil goes after.
Exactly. If that's your button, that's what he's going to go after. Next week we'll look at Ecclesiastes 6:10 verses through 7:13. Again, this is 16 verses. Depending on what time we start next week, I asked you to read these verses ahead of time because again we may fly through them. Shane has an announcement. Before that, though, I heard a little story not long ago. After a church service on Sunday morning, Bodie Coburn suddenly announced to his grandpa, "Poppy, I've decided to become a preacher when I grow up." "Well, that's great," Gary said, "but what made you decide that?" "Well," said Bodie, "I have to go to church on Sunday anyway, and I figure it would be more fun to stand up and yell than to sit down and listen." That's your grandson, not mine. Shane has an announcement. I ask you to please pay attention.
So I didn't know how best to do this, so I asked Lynn to just let me do this so I don't have to go around and tell everybody individually. So the good news, bad news, and like all news, it depends on your point of view. But the Air Force has selected me for a new position with the F-35 program. The bad news is that program is located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, not at Eglin Air Force Base. So we will be going back to Ohio because of that. And I just wanted to let everybody know I just found out this week that should happen at the end of August. So say by Labor Day, we'll be going back to Ohio. So we're very sad to go because we really like it here and we've really enjoyed it here and we've really enjoyed getting to know everybody here. And so so like I said, there's bad news here. We didn't want to leave, but it is a good opportunity. And so
can you do it through Zoom?
So I did ask that question. I said, can I take the job and stay in Florida? But the Air Force has this rule where you have to live within a certain distance of the base you're assigned to. So they said no. Anyway, are you asking a question?
Yeah. Since you're going to have to retire in the next 25 or 30 years, you'll be back here, so we'll enjoy you then.
There you go. And hopefully it won't be 25. I'm targeting closer to 15. So thank you for your time, but I just, to avoid having to go and tell each of you individually.
Thank you.
We'll keep Chris.
Yeah.
Chris is saying, good.
I had Shane lined up to teach a class, and he called me about a month ago and gave me this news, I had to swear, I had to, pinky finger swear not to say anything. We're gonna miss y'all, Shane and Christy.
And Jackie.
And Jackie and John, y'all leave when? Tomorrow.
Wow.
We're gonna miss y'all too.
Yes, very much.
So, you were one of my connections to Montgomery, how I got my Montgomery news. Between you and Gary, that's how we kept up with what was going on in Montgomery. Okay.